You think stretching a dollar during the 1950s meant sacrificing holiday sweetness? Think again. Resourceful home cooks turned pennies into Christmas magic, with desserts so delicious no one suspected they cost almost nothing. Let's dig into 30 dirt-cheap 1950s Christmas desserts the whole family will love. Wacky cake earned its name from the unusual method that made it possible. No eggs, no butter, no milk, yet somehow moist and deeply chocolatey. Depression-era ingenuity created this miracle by mixing flour, sugar, cocoa, baking soda, and salt directly in the baking pan, then adding vegetable oil, vinegar, and water. The vinegar reacted with baking soda to create lift, while oil provided moisture that butter would have given. The whole thing cost pennies to make when eggs were rationed or simply too expensive for everyday baking. Children loved helping because the mixing happened right in the pan, meaning fewer dishes and more fun. The cake emerged from the oven tender and rich, often dusted with powdered sugar or topped with a simple chocolate glaze. Families passed this recipe through generations, each one grateful for its simplicity during lean times. Wacky cake proved that sacrifice and celebration could share the same plate. Bread pudding transformed stale loaves into Christmas comfort, turning what would have been waste into one of the most beloved desserts of the era. Thrifty housewives saved bread heels and dried slices throughout the week, knowing Sunday's pudding depended on their frugality. The bread was torn into pieces, soaked in a custard of eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla, then baked until golden and puffed. Raisins or dried fruit added sweetness when available, while cinnamon and nutmeg made the kitchen smell like the holidays. The custard transformed dry bread into something almost magical, creamy in the center with crispy edges that everyone fought over. A simple sauce of butter, sugar, and vanilla, or whiskey for the adults, turned humble ingredients into celebration. Bread pudding cost nearly nothing yet delivered warmth and satisfaction that expensive desserts could not match. It taught children that nothing should ever go to waste. Vinegar pie mystified anyone who heard its name, yet those who tasted it discovered something remarkably close to lemon pie without the expensive citrus. The filling combined sugar, flour, eggs, butter, and plain white vinegar, creating a custard that was tangy, sweet, and surprisingly sophisticated. During the 1950s, when fresh lemons were seasonal luxuries, vinegar pie kept holiday tables bright with that essential tartness. The pie baked until the filling set and the top turned slightly golden, filling the kitchen with a caramelized sweetness that masked any hint of its humble origins. Some families topped it with meringue, stretching egg whites into billowy clouds that made the pie look far more expensive than its few cents worth of ingredients. Children never knew they were eating a substitute, they just knew they loved it. Vinegar pie represented the quiet genius of making do beautifully. Rice pudding turned leftover rice into creamy Christmas comfort that satisfied both children and adults with its gentle sweetness. Cooked rice was combined with milk, sugar, eggs, and vanilla, then baked slowly until the custard set and a golden skin formed on top. Raisins plumped in the warm mixture, becoming soft bursts of sweetness in every spoonful. The pudding could be served warm from the oven or chilled overnight, becoming even creamier as it rested. Cinnamon or nutmeg dusted on top added holiday fragrance without adding cost. Families who always had rice in the pantry found this dessert endlessly adaptable, using whatever milk was available and adjusting sweetness to taste. The slow baking filled homes with warmth during cold December evenings. Rice pudding proved that the simplest ingredients, treated with patience and care, could create something children requested again and again throughout the season. Graham cracker cake required no oven at all, making it perfect for busy holiday kitchens where the stove was already occupied with dinner. Layers of graham crackers were stacked with sweetened whipped cream or vanilla pudding between them, then refrigerated overnight until the crackers softened into cake-like layers. The transformation was almost magical, crisp crackers becoming tender and yielding, absorbing the cream until they melted on the tongue. Chocolate pudding variations created a dessert that rivaled expensive bakery cakes in appearance and satisfaction. The whole thing cost a fraction of traditional layer cakes and required no baking skill whatsoever. Children could help assemble layers, making it a family activity during the hectic holiday season. Crushed graham crackers sprinkled on top added crunch and visual appeal. This icebox cake proved that refrigerator and patience could replace oven and expertise while delivering equal celebration. Baked apples filled 1950s homes with the scent of cinnamon and brown sugar, transforming affordable fruit into individual holiday desserts that made everyone feel special. Rome or Granny Smith apples were cored and filled with a mixture of brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, and sometimes raisins or chopped nuts. Baked until tender and bubbling, each apple became its own serving, collapsing slightly into caramelized sweetness. The cooking liquid in the pan turned into syrup that was spooned over the apples before serving. A dollop of whipped cream or scoop of vanilla ice cream elevated the humble apple into company-worthy dessert. Families with apple trees or access to farm stands paid almost nothing for this elegant treat. Children loved having their own personal dessert rather than sharing a slice. Baked apples represented the 1950s philosophy of making simple things feel abundant and special. Popcorn balls were the edible decorations that doubled as desserts, hanging from Christmas trees before being devoured by eager children. Popped corn was mixed with a hot syrup of sugar, corn syrup, and butter that bound the kernels together into sticky, sweet spheres. Working quickly while the syrup was still pliable, mothers shaped balls with buttered hands, sometimes adding food coloring for festive red and green versions. The cost was minimal. Popcorn was among the cheapest snacks available, and the syrup ingredients were pantry staples. Children watched the transformation with wonder, seeing everyday popcorn become something magical and Christmassy. Wrapped in waxed paper or cellophane, popcorn balls became gifts for neighbors and classmates. The satisfying crunch gave way to caramelized sweetness that lingered on fingers and faces. Popcorn balls proved that celebration did not require expensive ingredients, just creativity and a willingness to get a little sticky. Chocolate gravy over biscuits brought Southern breakfast tradition to the Christmas dessert table, stretching cocoa and sugar into something that tasted far richer than its humble origins. The gravy was made by cooking cocoa powder, sugar, flour, and milk together until thickened into a glossy, pourable sauce. Hot biscuits, split open and waiting, soaked up the warm chocolate until they became soft, almost pudding-like beneath their crusty tops. The combination cost pennies yet delivered chocolate satisfaction that expensive cakes could not surpass. Children would eat 3 or 4 biscuits drowning in gravy, their faces smeared with chocolate and happiness. Families stretched the recipe further by using leftover biscuits from breakfast, ensuring nothing went to waste. The gravy could be made in minutes, perfect for Christmas morning when other demands competed for attention. Chocolate gravy proved that poverty and pleasure were not opposites but partners. Snow ice cream appeared like magic after winter storms, requiring nothing more than fresh fallen snow, sugar, vanilla, and milk or cream. Children would rush outside with large bowls to gather clean snow, while mothers prepared the simple mixture inside the warm kitchen. The snow was folded gently into sweetened vanilla milk, creating instant soft serve that tasted like frozen wonder and winter itself. The dessert cost essentially nothing and could only be made during those special snowy days, making it feel even more precious and exciting. Families developed their own secret recipes, some adding cocoa for chocolate snow cream or canned fruit for fruity variations. The ice cream had to be eaten immediately before it melted, creating a flurry of happy spoons and sticky faces around the kitchen table. Snow ice cream connected children to the weather and the season in ways store-bought treats never could. Cornstarch pudding was the blank canvas of 1950s desserts, a simple vanilla base that could become anything a creative cook imagined. Cornstarch, sugar, milk, and vanilla cooked together until thickened into silky pudding that cost mere pennies per serving. Chocolate versions added cocoa powder, butterscotch used brown sugar and butter, and banana pudding layered the vanilla base with sliced fruit and wafers. The pudding could be served warm in bowls or chilled until firm and sliceable. Families who could not afford expensive bakery items found that cornstarch pudding satisfied sweet cravings just as well. Children loved watching the thin milk transform into thick, glossy pudding right before their eyes. Topped with whipped cream or crushed cookies, it looked as impressive as any restaurant dessert. Cornstarch pudding represented the 1950s mastery of making something from almost nothing. Molasses cookies spread their spicy fragrance through 1950s kitchens during the weeks leading up to Christmas, made from ingredients that cost almost nothing. Molasses was far cheaper than refined sugar and gave cookies a deep, complex sweetness that plain sugar could never match. The dough combined molasses with flour, lard or shortening, ginger, cinnamon, and a touch of baking soda that made them puff and crack beautifully. Rolled in sugar before baking, each cookie emerged with a crackled top and chewy center that improved over several days of storage. Children helped cut shapes with drinking glasses when cookie cutters were unavailable, pressing their small hands into the soft dough. The cookies traveled well, making them perfect for gift tins exchanged between neighbors and church friends. A single batch yielded dozens of cookies from pantry staples every household already owned. Molasses cookies represented the generous spirit of Christmas baking without the generous price tag. Applesauce cake was the clever baker's secret, using fruit puree to replace expensive eggs and butter while creating something remarkably moist and flavorful. Homemade applesauce from windfall apples cost nothing, and even store-bought versions were among the cheapest canned goods available. The applesauce provided moisture, binding, and natural sweetness that reduced the need for sugar. Spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves transformed the humble batter into something that smelled like Christmas itself. The cake baked into a dense, satisfying loaf that kept fresh for days, wrapped in waxed paper and stored in a cool pantry. Raisins or chopped nuts could be added when the budget allowed, but the plain version satisfied just as completely. Families who kept apple trees found this cake almost free to make, using preserved sauce from the fall harvest. Applesauce cake proved that limitation sparked creativity, and creativity produced deliciousness. Peanut butter fudge required no chocolate at all, stretching pantry staples into creamy candy that rivaled expensive confections. Peanut butter, sugar, milk, and butter cooked together until the mixture reached soft ball stage, then beat until thick and creamy. Poured into a buttered pan, the fudge set into squares that were rich, sweet, and intensely peanutty. The recipe used ingredients most families already had, making it possible to produce holiday candy without a special shopping trip. Children loved helping stir the heavy mixture, watching it transform from grainy to glossy as the beating progressed. The fudge could be made in under an hour, perfect for last-minute gifts or unexpected company. Cut into small squares and arranged on plates, it looked as elegant as any store-bought candy. Peanut butter fudge taught that homemade gifts carried more love than anything money could purchase from the department store candy counter. Oatmeal cake emerged from the 1950s as a frugal baker's triumph, using inexpensive oats to create something that tasted almost like a fancy German chocolate cake. Rolled oats were soaked in boiling water until soft, then mixed into a batter with brown sugar, eggs, and vanilla. The cake baked into a moist, almost pudding-like texture that needed no frosting to satisfy. But the traditional topping made it special, a broiled mixture of coconut, brown sugar, butter, and evaporated milk that bubbled and caramelized under the heat. The whole dessert cost a fraction of traditional layer cakes, yet delivered that same celebratory feeling. Oats were among the cheapest grains available, and the topping used shelf-stable ingredients every pantry contained. The cake traveled well and actually improved overnight as the flavors melded together. Oatmeal cake represented ingenuity that turned breakfast cereal into Christmas celebration. Jello salad doubled as dessert during the 1950s, when gelatin molds graced every holiday table and cost mere pennies to prepare. A single box of flavored gelatin could be stretched with canned fruit, nuts, and whipped topping to serve 8 or more people generously. Red and green versions made natural Christmas centerpieces, their jewel-like colors glowing under dining room lights. Children loved the wobble and jiggle, while adults appreciated the light sweetness after heavy holiday meals. The molds required only hot water to dissolve the gelatin, then refrigeration overnight to set. Cottage cheese or cream cheese mixed in created richer variations that seemed almost like cheesecake. Families competed to create the most elaborate molds, layering colors and adding suspended fruits that looked like edible artwork. Jello salad proved that affordable could still be beautiful, festive, and absolutely delicious to a generation raised on its wiggly charm. Sugar cookies were the democratic dessert of 1950s Christmas, requiring only flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and vanilla to create magic. The dough rolled out smooth and flat, ready for cookie cutters in every holiday shape imaginable: stars, bells, trees, and Santa faces. Children gathered around kitchen tables, pressing cutters into dough and carefully transferring shapes to baking sheets. Plain cookies were beautiful enough, but colored sugar or simple icing transformed them into edible art. The recipe yielded dozens of cookies from basic ingredients, making them perfect for classroom parties and neighbor gifts. Mistakes could be re-rolled and cut again, ensuring nothing went to waste. The cookies kept for weeks in tins, their crisp texture giving way to buttery sweetness with each bite. Sugar cookies represented Christmas itself, the smell of them baking signaling that the season had truly arrived at last. Dump cake earned its name from the effortless method, literally dumping ingredients into a pan and letting the oven do all the work. A can of fruit pie filling spread across the bottom, topped with dry cake mix straight from the box, then dotted with butter. As it baked, the butter melted through the cake mix, creating a cobbler-like topping over bubbling fruit. The whole thing cost less than $1 and required no mixing bowls, measuring cups, or baking expertise whatsoever. Cherry pie filling with white cake mix became a Christmas classic, its red and white layers looking almost deliberately festive. Families short on time or energy found dump cake a lifesaver during the hectic holiday season. Served warm with vanilla ice cream, it rivaled far more complicated desserts in satisfaction. Dump cake proved that sometimes the simplest approach produced the most beloved results around the holiday table. Prune whip transformed the humble dried plum into an elegant mousse-like dessert that cost almost nothing to prepare. Stewed prunes were pureed and folded into beaten egg whites, creating a light, airy confection that seemed far more sophisticated than its ingredients suggested. The natural sweetness of the prunes meant little added sugar was needed, making it economical and relatively healthy. Chilled until set, the whip held its shape beautifully when spooned into dessert dishes. A dollop of whipped cream on top elevated the presentation from everyday to company-worthy. Prunes were among the cheapest dried fruits available, often purchased in bulk at significant savings. The dessert provided the iron and fiber that nutrition-conscious mothers appreciated during the indulgent holiday season. Prune whip represented the 1950s ability to make elegance from economy, sophistication from simplicity, and celebration from staples. Pineapple upside-down cake made canned fruit into a showstopper dessert that never failed to impress holiday guests. Brown sugar and butter melted together in a cast-iron skillet, topped with pineapple rings and maraschino cherries that became the cake's jeweled crown. Simple yellow cake batter poured over the fruit baked into golden perfection, then flipped dramatically to reveal the caramelized topping. Canned pineapple cost far less than fresh and was available year-round, making this impressive dessert accessible to every budget. The cake required only one pan and basic pantry ingredients, yet looked like it came from an expensive bakery. Children loved the sweet cherries nestled in each pineapple ring, often claiming their favorite piece before the first slice was cut. The caramelized topping formed a glossy glaze that made the whole cake sparkle under holiday lights. Pineapple upside-down cake proved that drama and affordability could share the same dessert plate. Tapioca pudding turned tiny pearls into creamy comfort that satisfied sweet cravings at minimal cost during the holiday season. Pearl tapioca simmered in milk until the spheres became translucent and the mixture thickened into silky, spoonable pudding. Eggs, sugar, and vanilla enriched the base, while the tapioca pearls provided the fascinating texture that children loved discovering in each bite. The pudding could be served warm from the stovetop or chilled overnight in the refrigerator, making it versatile for different preferences. A single box of tapioca made multiple batches, stretching the ingredient cost across several dessert servings for the whole family. Some families added coconut or fruit to vary the recipe, but the plain version remained most requested by children and adults alike. Tapioca pudding represented the gentle, nurturing side of 1950s desserts. a food that comforted as much as it satisfied. Butterscotch pie delivered rich caramel flavor from nothing more than brown sugar, butter, and milk cooked into golden custard that satisfied the deepest sweet cravings. The filling came together on the stovetop, brown sugar melting into butter until it bubbled and darkened, then thickened with flour and enriched with egg yolks. Poured into a baked pie shell, the custard set into something that tasted like expensive candy but cost only pennies to prepare. Meringue piled high on top used the leftover egg whites, ensuring nothing went to waste while adding impressive height and visual drama. The pie's deep amber color glowed under kitchen lights, promising sweetness before the first bite was taken. Brown sugar cost less than white and delivered more complex flavor, making butterscotch the frugal baker's secret weapon. Children loved the intense sweetness, while adults appreciated the sophisticated caramel notes. Butterscotch pie proved that luxury was not about cost, but about understanding how humble ingredients could transform. Banana pudding layered simple vanilla custard with sliced bananas and vanilla wafers into something that tasted like celebration at family gatherings and church socials. The custard was homemade, cooked slowly on the stovetop until thick and glossy, then layered while still warm over cookies and fruit. As the pudding chilled overnight, the wafers softened and the bananas released their sweetness into the custard, creating flavors that melded into pure comfort. Meringue topping, browned under the broiler, added visual drama without adding cost. Bananas were among the cheapest fruits available year-round, and vanilla wafers stretched the dessert to serve large families generously. Church potlucks always featured at least one banana pudding, often more when several cooks brought their own cherished versions. Children fought over the soft, pudding-soaked wafers that had absorbed the most custard. Banana pudding represented the 1950s genius of turning everyday ingredients into something families genuinely craved all year long. Fruit cocktail cake transformed a single can of mixed fruit into a moist, tender cake that required almost no effort or expense to prepare. The canned fruit, juice, and all was mixed directly into a simple batter of flour, sugar, eggs, and baking soda without draining. As the cake baked, the fruit distributed throughout, each bite offering surprise bursts of peach, pear, cherry, and grape that delighted children. The juice kept the cake incredibly moist while adding natural sweetness that reduced the need for expensive refined sugar. A brown sugar and coconut topping broiled until bubbling and caramelized made the cake look fancy enough for company. Canned fruit cocktail cost pennies and was available in every grocery store, making this cake accessible to families on the tightest budgets. The recipe required no mixer, no complicated technique, just a bowl and a spoon and 15 minutes of effort. Fruit cocktail cake proved that convenience and deliciousness could share the same baking pan beautifully. Divinity candy looked like clouds fallen from heaven and tasted like pure sweetness, crystallized into pillowy mounds that melted on the tongue. Sugar, corn syrup, and water cooked to hard ball stage, then beaten into stiff egg whites until the mixture turned glossy white and held its shape when dropped. Spooned onto waxed paper in small mounds, each piece set into a delicate confection that dissolved instantly. The recipe required patience and good weather. Humidity made Divinity sticky and sad. But success meant impressive candy that looked completely store-bought. Pecans or walnuts pressed into each piece added welcome crunch when the budget allowed, but plain Divinity satisfied just as completely. Mothers made batches during the dry, cold days of December when conditions were perfect for candy making. Children watched the transformation with wonder, seeing liquid sugar become fluffy white clouds. Divinity proved that magic happened in 1950s kitchens when basic ingredients met patient skill and careful timing. Apple Brown Betty layered sliced apples with buttered breadcrumbs and brown sugar into a dessert that cost almost nothing, yet tasted deeply satisfying and comforting. Stale bread found new life as crumbs toasted in butter, becoming golden and crispy before being layered with seasoned fruit. Cinnamon and nutmeg perfumed the layers while lemon juice kept the apples bright and prevented browning. As the Betty baked, The crumbs absorbed the apple juices and the top turned gloriously crunchy while the inside stayed soft and fruity. The dessert required no special pan, no pastry skills, just the willingness to layer ingredients and let the oven work its magic. Families with apple trees made Brown Betty throughout fall and winter, using stored fruit that might otherwise go soft before being eaten. Served warm with fresh cream poured over, it rivaled any fancy pie. Apple Brown Betty represented thrift transformed into genuine deliciousness that families requested again and again. Custard pie was simplicity perfected, nothing but eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla baked into silky smoothness that melted on the tongue with every bite. The filling required no cooking on the stovetop, just whisking ingredients together and pouring them into an unbaked crust carefully. As the pie baked low and slow, the custard set from the edges inward, developing a golden top dusted with nutmeg that filled the kitchen with comforting warmth. The ingredients cost mere pennies. Eggs from backyard chickens, milk from the dairy, sugar and vanilla from the pantry shelf. Yet the result tasted elegant, the kind of dessert that proved skill mattered more than expensive ingredients or complicated techniques. Grandmothers made custard pie for sick children, knowing its gentle sweetness would soothe without overwhelming delicate stomachs. The texture was impossibly smooth, quivering slightly when the plate moved, promising tenderness with every forkful. Custard pie reminded families that sometimes the oldest recipes remained the very best. Soda cracker pie fooled everyone into thinking they were eating apple pie when no apples existed anywhere in the recipe at all. Crushed soda crackers soaked in a syrup of sugar, water, lemon juice, and cream of tartar somehow transformed into something that tasted remarkably like cooked apples. The chemical reaction between the acidic ingredients and the plain crackers created flavors and textures that mimicked fruit with uncanny accuracy that fooled even skeptics. Baked in a double crust with cinnamon sprinkled throughout, the pie emerged golden and fragrant, its filling soft and apple-like beneath the flaky pastry. Depression-era cooks invented this miracle when real apples were unavailable or unaffordable, and families kept making it through the 1950s because it genuinely worked so well. Children never suspected the trick unless someone revealed the secret after the last slice disappeared from the plate. Soda cracker pie proved that necessity truly was the mother of delicious culinary invention. Cottage pudding was the simplest of cakes topped with the richest of sauces, proving that humble ingredients could become something memorable and special. The cake itself was a basic yellow batter: flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and milk, baked in a square pan until golden and springy to the touch. But the magic happened when warm sauce was poured generously over each serving, transforming plain cake into something approaching decadence. Lemon sauce made from sugar, butter, and fresh lemon juice was the most common, its tartness cutting through the cake's sweetness perfectly. Chocolate sauce turned it into something children begged for repeatedly, while butterscotch made adults close their eyes in pleasure. The cake cost almost nothing to make. The sauce required only pantry staples, yet together they created a dessert worthy of any holiday table or special occasion. Cottage pudding proved that presentation and a good sauce could elevate the most basic cake into true celebration. Date bars packed dried fruit and oats into chewy squares that traveled well and lasted for weeks, stored in tins without losing their appeal. Chopped dates were cooked with sugar and water until soft and jammy, then spread between layers of buttery oat crumble that turned golden when baked. As the bars emerged from the oven, the oat mixture had become crispy, while the date filling stayed soft and sticky in the center. Each square offered contrasting textures, crunchy exterior giving way to chewy, intensely sweet center that satisfied in small portions. Dates were affordable dried fruit that provided natural sweetness and kept indefinitely in pantries without refrigeration. The bars required no frosting, no decoration, just honest ingredients combined with simple technique and patience. Families made large batches for Christmas cookie exchanges, knowing date bars would stand out among fancier offerings. Date bars represented practical deliciousness that never went out of style through changing decades. Gingerbread filled 1950s homes with the scent of Christmas itself, its spicy warmth announcing the holidays had truly arrived at last. Molasses gave the batter its deep mahogany color and complex sweetness, while ginger, cinnamon, and cloves provided the signature warmth that tingled on the tongue. The cake baked into something dense and moist, almost sticky, that improved over several days as the flavors deepened and melded together. Served warm with whipped cream or tangy lemon sauce, it became dessert, but many families ate it plain for breakfast during the holiday weeks. Molasses cost far less than refined sugar and delivered far more interesting flavor, making gingerbread an economical choice for families stretching their budgets. Children helped stir the thick batter, sneaking tastes of the raw mixture despite warnings. The spices were pantry staples that lasted through many batches. Gingerbread proved that Christmas tradition and thrifty cooking walked hand in hand through generations of holiday baking. Kolachi were those Czech pastries that appeared in bakeries and home kitchens during the Christmas season. Their soft, yeasted dough holding pools of fruit filling or sweetened farmer cheese. The dough was rich with butter and eggs, rolled into small rounds and pressed in the center to create wells for the filling. Traditional fillings included prune, poppy seed, apricot, and a sweetened cheese mixture that was almost like cheesecake. Czech immigrant communities in Texas and Nebraska made kolachi for every holiday, but Christmas brought the most elaborate versions. The pastries were arranged on platters, their colorful fillings creating a mosaic effect that made tables look festive. Making kolache required patience. The dough needed proper rising, the fillings careful preparation. Each family had their signature recipes, guarded and passed down through generations. The pastries were meant for sharing, brought to church gatherings and neighborhood parties. Buckeyes were the peanut butter balls dipped in chocolate to resemble Ohio's state nut, with their signature spot of tan peeking through dark coating. Mothers mixed peanut butter with butter, powdered sugar, and sometimes crispy rice cereal until the mixture was firm enough to roll. Each ball was chilled, then skewered with a toothpick and dipped into melted chocolate, leaving the top exposed. The two-tone appearance made Buckeyes instantly recognizable, their name honoring the Buckeye tree whose nuts they resembled. Children loved the combination of smooth peanut butter filling and crisp chocolate shell, often eating them in 2 bites to appreciate each texture separately. The candies were particularly beloved in Midwestern families, where Buckeye trees grew and state pride ran strong. Making Buckeyes became a family assembly line, with children rolling balls while mothers handled the hot chocolate. These candies proved that regional traditions could spread nationwide when the flavor was this good. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Prune cake was one of those desserts people loved long before they ever admitted it, a moist, spiced treat that showed up on countless holiday tables thanks to its deep flavor and long shelf life. Grandmothers especially swore by it, calling it their secret weapon because it never dried out and always tasted better the next day. The prunes disappeared into the batter, lending sweetness and moisture without announcing themselves too boldly, and the spices wrapped everything in a warm, comforting aroma. It was a cake that stretched ingredients wisely, perfect for large families and tight budgets. Children would roll their eyes at the thought of prunes, but one bite of that sticky sweet crumb made them believers. It was a dessert born from practicality, the kind of treat that made the most of what people had on hand. But as times changed and holiday desserts became flashier, prune cake was left behind. It did not look glamorous, it did not have fancy toppings, and it did not fit the modern obsession with picture-perfect food. So it vanished, even though anyone who ever loved it can still taste it in their memory, a quiet classic forgotten but never truly gone. Suet pudding with hard sauce was Christmas comfort food for families who valued richness over refinement. The pudding itself was simple: flour, suet, sugar, and spices steamed until dense and satisfying. What elevated it was the hard sauce, a mixture of butter, powdered sugar, and brandy beaten until fluffy and pale. The cold sauce melted slowly over warm pudding, creating rivers of boozy sweetness that soaked into every bite. Families served this after heavy Christmas dinners when something substantial was needed to conclude the feast. The suet gave the pudding a texture impossible to achieve with butter, tender yet sturdy enough to hold together. Children received smaller portions with less sauce, the brandy content making it adult territory. Making hard sauce required patience and strong arms, the butter needing thorough beating to achieve proper consistency. This dessert disappeared as sweet became difficult to source and modern tastes shifted toward lighter fare. Yule log cake was the showpiece of Christmas desserts, a chocolate sponge rolled around cream filling and decorated to resemble a bark-covered log complete with meringue mushrooms and marzipan holly. French in origin, the bûche de Noël became an American tradition during the mid-20th century when elegant entertaining reached its peak. Making one required rolling warm sponge cake without cracking it, a technique demanding practice and confidence. The cake was spread with buttercream or whipped cream, rolled tightly, then frosted with chocolate dragged with a fork to simulate bark. Decorators added knots and branch stubs, dusted everything with powdered sugar snow, and arranged tiny meringue mushrooms. The presentation was theatrical, carried to the table whole, then sliced to reveal the spiral inside. Bakeries charged premium prices for Yule logs, but ambitious home bakers tackled them as Christmas Eve projects. The cake combined artistry with flavor in ways modern desserts rarely attempt. Hard candy drops were the jewel-toned confections that mothers poured into molds or dropped onto marble slabs, each piece catching light like stained glass. Sugar, corn syrup, and water were boiled to the hard crack stage, then quickly mixed with food coloring and flavoring before being poured into shapes. The process required speed and precision. Hard candy set within minutes and couldn't be reworked once it cooled. Lemon drops glowed yellow, cinnamon discs burned red, and mint rounds sparkled green, creating a rainbow on every candy dish. Children loved sucking on these candies, feeling them slowly dissolve and release intense bursts of flavor. Some mothers used antique molds passed down through generations, pressing candy into shapes of Christmas trees, bells, and stars. The candies kept for weeks in tins, making them perfect for gift-giving and stocking stuffers. Hard candy drops required mastering high-temperature sugar work, a skill that separated casual candy makers from serious Christmas confectioners. Creamed celery was the sophisticated cousin of other creamed vegetables, turning the overlooked stalk into something worthy of fine china and silver spoons. Cooks sliced celery on the diagonal and simmered it until tender, then folded it into rich white sauce enriched with cream and butter. Seasonings were delicate: white pepper, a touch of nutmeg, perhaps parsley for color. The celery retained gentle crunch even in the sauce, providing textural interest other creamed vegetables lacked. This was a dish for formal dinners and holiday gatherings, its mild elegance complementing rather than competing with richer offerings. Pale green and white colors added sophistication to tables heavy with browns. Some cooks topped creamed celery with toasted almonds, creating a gratin that bordered on indulgent. The dish required fresh celery at its crispest, making winter holidays the perfect occasion. Creamed celery has virtually disappeared from modern menus, a casualty of changing tastes that forgot how refined simple vegetables could become. Date nut roll was the kind of dessert that made children hover anxiously around the kitchen, waiting for the moment it was sliced. It was not a pie or a cake, but a refrigerator candy, rolled by hand and packed with sweet dates, nuts, and just enough cookie crumbs to hold everything together. Families made it weeks before the holiday, storing it away in wax paper like treasure hidden in the back of the fridge. When you sliced it, the spirals of sticky fruit and crunchy nuts made every piece look like a tiny stained glass window, and the taste was just as memorable. It was sweet without being overwhelming, rich without being heavy, and easy to stretch for a crowd when money was tight. Making it was a labor of love, requiring time and patience that people no longer make space for. As store-bought candy boxes and pre-made sweets filled the shelves, the roll faded away, seen as too old-fashioned or too fiddly for modern kitchens, but back then it symbolized celebration, care, and the quiet excitement of a holiday dessert pulled from a cold shelf on a chilly evening. A little forgotten, maybe, but never undeserving of its place at the table. Let's dig into 30 lost Christmas desserts America completely forgot. Fruitcake with Suet was once the undisputed king of Christmas desserts, baked weeks in advance and aged like fine wine in American pantries. The recipe called for beef sweet, hard fat from around the kidneys, which gave the cake an incomparably moist texture that butter could not replicate. Dried fruits were soaked in brandy for days before being folded into dense batter, heavy with molasses and spices. The cakes were wrapped in cheesecloth soaked in spirits and stored in cool cellars, developing deeper flavor each week. Families served thin slices alongside coffee after Christmas dinner, the richness demanding moderation. The Suet kept the cake fresh for months, practical for households without reliable refrigeration. Children wrinkled their noses at the dense texture, but adults understood this was celebration food meant to last. Today, fruitcake survives mostly as a punchline, but the Suet-laden original was magnificent. Tutti Frutti candy was that rainbow-colored confection made by preserving fruits in brandy throughout the year. Each season's harvest added to a crock that became Christmas treasure. The process began in spring with strawberries, continued through summer with cherries and peaches, and finished in fall with pears and grapes, each addition accompanied by sugar and spirits. The crock sat in a cool place, occasionally stirred, the fruit slowly breaking down into jeweled conserve tasting of concentrated summer. At Christmas, the Tutti Frutti was spooned over ice cream, pound cake, or eaten straight as a boozy treat for adults. Some families kept their crocks going for years, the flavor deepening with each passing season. The tradition required forethought that modern cooks rarely possess, remembering to add each fruit at its peak, maintaining proper ratios. Tutti Frutti represented the old way of cooking when preparing for Christmas began in spring, and patience was an essential ingredient. Caramels were the buttery squares that stuck to teeth in the most satisfying way, each piece a study in perfectly cooked sugar and cream. Mothers would combine sugar, corn syrup, butter, and cream in heavy pots, stirring constantly as the mixture darkened from pale gold to rich amber. The temperature had to reach exactly the firm ball stage. Too soft, and the caramels wouldn't hold their shape. Too hard, and they'd crack teeth. Poured into buttered pans and cooled, the caramel was cut into squares and wrapped individually in waxed paper twisted at both ends. The texture was dense yet yielding, requiring serious chewing that released waves of buttery, slightly burnt sugar flavor. Some mothers added vanilla, others a pinch of sea salt before salted caramel became trendy. Children would unwrap piece after piece, the waxy paper accumulating in pockets and between couch cushions. Homemade caramels represented patience and precision, candies that couldn't be rushed but rewarded every minute of careful attention. Harvard beets brought deep crimson elegance to holiday tables, their sweet and sour glaze glistening like rubies under dining room lights. The dish took its name from the university whose color it matched, though the connection ended there. Cooks sliced cooked beets into rounds, then simmered them in sauce of sugar, cornstarch, vinegar, and butter until the glaze thickened and coated each piece. The result was simultaneously sweet and tangy, earthiness balanced by bright acidity. Some recipes called for orange zest or cloves, adding complexity to the straightforward preparation. The vibrant color made Harvard beets a visual dream, adding drama to tables dominated by browns and beiges. Children often resisted at first, but the sweet glaze converted many skeptics. This was practical cooking too, as canned beets worked perfectly fine when fresh ones were unavailable during winter. Harvard beets represented an era when vegetables were dressed up for company, transformed from everyday nutrition into worthy holiday companions. Apple pandowdy was the rustic cousin of all the fancier apple desserts, a dish that did not care about looks or presentation and still managed to win every heart at the table. It began with sliced apples simmered with cinnamon, butter, and a touch of brown sugar until the whole house smelled like the inside of an orchard. Instead of laying a perfect crust over the top, cooks would break pieces of dough and scatter them unevenly, letting the edges sink into the bubbling fruit as it baked. The juices caramelized around the dough, turning each little piece into something crisp, chewy, and irresistible. This was a dessert for families who valued flavor over perfection, people who understood that the best dishes are sometimes the messiest. Children loved it because it felt fun, like a dessert that broke the rules, and adults loved it because it tasted like the orchard harvest served straight from the pan. But as crisps and cobblers became more popular and easier to sell in bakeries, the pandowdy quietly slipped away. Its uneven top was not camera-ready, and its old-fashioned name did not help it survive in a modern world. Still, anyone who ever ate it fresh from the oven remembers the way it tasted like fall itself, a forgotten treasure hiding in plain sight. Chess tarts for Christmas multiplied the beloved southern chess pie into individual portions perfect for holiday gatherings. Each tart shell held the same buttery, custardy filling: eggs, sugar, butter, and a splash of vinegar that gave it distinctive tang. The tops cracked beautifully during baking, creating golden surfaces that shattered with each bite. Families baked dozens for Christmas parties, the small size allowing guests to sample without committing to full slices. The filling was simple but required precise technique to achieve the right texture, neither too runny nor too firm. Some cooks added lemon or chocolate, creating variations that filled platters with visual variety. Children could eat these without the mess of larger desserts, making them practical for holiday chaos. The tarts kept well, actually improving overnight as flavors melded. Chess tarts disappeared as store-bought cookies replaced homemade holiday treats, sacrificing craftsmanship for convenience. Lebkuchen were those soft, spiced German cookies that arrived in decorative tins each Christmas, their tops glazed white and their bottoms covered in edible paper called Oblaten. Unlike hard gingerbread, Lebkuchen were meant to be chewy and moist, dense with honey, almonds, and a complex blend of spices that included cardamom, coriander, and anise. German bakeries had perfected these cookies over centuries, and immigrant families brought recipes to America, where Lebkuchen became Christmas traditions in communities from Wisconsin to Texas. The dough was made weeks in advance, stored in crocks to ripen before being cut and baked. The characteristic glaze was made from powdered sugar and water, painted on while cookies were still warm so it dried to a crackled finish. Families would order tins from German specialty shops or make their own following handwritten recipes. Lebkuchen kept for months when stored properly, improving with age as the spices mellowed into harmony. Rum balls were the adult-friendly treat that children begged to taste despite, or perhaps because of, being told they couldn't. Mothers would crush vanilla wafers into fine crumbs, then mix them with cocoa powder, powdered sugar, corn syrup, chopped pecans, and enough rum to bind everything together. The mixture was rolled into small balls, then coated in more powdered sugar, cocoa, or finely chopped nuts. No baking was required, making rum balls perfect for busy December days when ovens were already occupied. The flavor was sophisticated, the rum mellowing as the balls aged and integrating with chocolate and nuts into something complex. Some mothers made batches with less rum specifically for children, though kids always wanted the real thing. Stored in tins, rum balls improved over several days, the flavors deepening and the texture becoming more tender. They were passed at adult gatherings and tucked into gift boxes for teachers and neighbors, a candy that bridged the gap between cookie and confection. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Shoofly pie was a slice of Appalachian history wrapped in a layer of sticky molasses and crumb topping, a dessert born from frugality and resourcefulness. It was called Shoofly because the sweet smell drew flies toward the table and cooks had to shoo them away as the pie cooled. Families made it because molasses was cheaper and easier to store than sugar, making it the perfect holiday ingredient for households that had more hard work than money. The pie baked into a deep, gooey layer at the bottom with a crumbly cake-like topping on top, creating a texture that felt both rustic and indulgent. Children loved it because it was sweet enough to feel forbidden, and adults enjoyed it because every bite tasted like the land they came from. Over time, as refined sugar became cheap and store-bought pies took over, Shoofly pie disappeared from most homes. It was too regional, too old-fashioned, too simple to compete with newer holiday desserts, but the people who remember it still talk about it with a quiet pride. It was a dessert that told a story, and every slice tasted a little like history. Mincemeat pie with actual meat carried centuries of English tradition into American holiday tables. The filling combined finely chopped beef or venison with suet, apples, raisins, currants, citrus peel, and a heavy pour of brandy or rum. Spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves transformed what sounds strange into something hauntingly delicious. The meat provided richness and body, while the fruit added sweetness and moisture. Families made mincemeat in enormous batches each November, jarring it for use throughout the holiday season. The alcohol preserved the mixture and mellowed the flavors over weeks of aging. Served warm with hard sauce or brandy butter, mincemeat pie was the centerpiece of Christmas Eve suppers across New England and the Mid-Atlantic. Children were given small portions, the boozy richness considered adult fare. Modern mincemeat abandoned the meat entirely, leaving behind only a pale imitation of the original. The authentic version was complex, savory sweet, and utterly unforgettable. Popcorn balls were those sticky sweet spheres that appeared at Christmas parties and were tucked into stockings, their buttery caramel coating holding popped corn in tight formations. Making them required cooking sugar and butter to the right temperature, then quickly tossing in popcorn and shaping the mixture while still warm enough to mold. The timing was crucial. Too hot and the balls fell apart, too cool and they wouldn't stick. Red and green food coloring turned plain popcorn balls festive, while some added peanuts for variety. Children loved receiving popcorn balls, their impressive size and satisfying sweetness making them special treats. Schools and churches made them for fundraisers, wrapping each in cellophane tied with ribbon. Popcorn balls represented American ingenuity, transforming a simple snack into holiday candy through sugar and skill. Anise hard candy was the licorice-flavored confection that divided families into passionate lovers and determined avoiders. Mothers boiled sugar to hard crack stage, then added anise oil that filled kitchens with its distinctive medicinal sweet scent. The candy was poured into molds or dropped onto slabs, each piece turning clear and glassy as it cooled. The flavor was intense and unmistakable, that sharp licorice bite that either delighted or repelled tasters. Children who loved anise considered it their special treat, knowing siblings wouldn't steal from their stash. For families with Italian or German heritage, anise candy carried cultural significance connecting Christmas to ancestral traditions. The candies were shaped into stars or drops, surfaces sometimes dusted with powdered sugar. Anise hard candy represented the ethnic diversity of American Christmas traditions preserved through generations. Tomato aspic was the elegant mold that separated sophisticated hostesses from casual cooks, its shimmering clarity announcing refinement on any holiday table. Tomato juice was combined with unflavored gelatin, lemon juice, Worcestershire sauce, and careful seasoning, then poured into decorative molds to set. The result was a quivering ruby ring that held its shape when unmolded onto beds of crisp lettuce. Some versions included chopped celery, olives, or shrimp suspended within like jewels in amber. The taste was intensely savory, nothing like sweet fruit gelatins that dominated other parts of the meal. Aspic required confidence, as unmolding could go wrong if the gelatin hadn't set properly. Successful unmolding brought genuine pride, the mold releasing perfectly onto its serving platter with a satisfying wobble. Tomato aspic represented formal entertaining from an earlier era, when certain dishes signaled social knowledge. Its disappearance marked changing tastes that favor simplicity over structured elegance. Cranberry pudding with hard sauce was one of those desserts that looked humble on the outside but carried a surprising punch once you cut into it. This steamed pudding was dense, tart, and beautifully old-fashioned, the kind of dish families made before ovens were common in every home. The cranberries gave it a deep ruby color and a sharpness that cut through the heaviness of a Thanksgiving meal, and it always arrived at the table warm enough to fog up the windows. But the real magic came from the hard sauce, a thick mixture of butter, sugar, and a touch of something strong enough to make everyone at the table raise their eyebrows just a bit. When you dolloped it over the pudding, it melted slowly, seeping into every corner and creating a flavor no modern dessert can truly imitate. Families made this because it felt festive, grown up, and cozy all at once, a dessert that lit up the room even without frosting or decorations. Over time, the steaming process fell out of fashion, and people traded long cooking times for convenience. Microwaves replaced kettles, boxed mixes replaced handwritten recipes, and the pudding slipped quietly into obscurity. But the truth is, a dessert like this was never about convenience. It was about gathering in the kitchen, checking the pot, waiting together, and finally sharing something warm and indulgent on a cold holiday night, a forgotten classic, but one with a heart that has never really disappeared. Syllabub in stemmed glasses was Christmas elegance whipped into frothy perfection. This ancient English dessert combined cream, sugar, and wine or sherry, beaten until it formed soft peaks that held their shape in delicate glasses. The mixture separated slowly, the creamy foam floating above a pool of flavored liquid that guests sipped after finishing the top. Families served syllabub at the end of Christmas dinner, the light texture providing relief after heavy courses. Making it required vigorous whisking by hand, often delegated to daughters learning domestic arts. The wine needed careful selection. Too sweet and the dessert became cloying, too dry and it lacked charm. Some versions incorporated lemon juice for brightness, cutting through the richness with citrus tang. The dessert looked ethereal in crystal glasses, catching candlelight and trembling with each movement. Syllabub disappeared as electric mixers made whipped cream commonplace and the patience for hand whisking vanished. It was celebration in a glass. Candied citrus peel was the jewel-like garnish decorating Christmas cakes and cookies. Strips of orange, lemon, and grapefruit rind transformed through days of simmering into translucent, sugar-crusted confections. The process began by scoring citrus rinds and soaking them in water for days, changing the water repeatedly to remove bitterness. Then came slow simmering in increasingly concentrated sugar syrups, the peels gradually absorbing sweetness while maintaining their shape. The final step was drying, either air-dried on racks or rolled in granulated sugar for a crystalline coating. The finished peels could be dipped in chocolate, chopped into fruitcakes, or eaten as candy, each piece a concentrated burst of citrus tempered by sweetness. During the 1960s, no Christmas fruitcake was complete without homemade candied peel. Making it required unhurried time that Christmas preparations once demanded, days of attention and watching the transformation happen. The peels kept for months, allowing cooks to prepare them well in advance. Ribbon candy was the impossibly thin, ruffled confection that looked like frozen silk and required true artistry to create. Molten sugar was pulled and folded repeatedly until it developed a satiny sheen, then stretched into long ribbons and pleated while still pliable. The process required speed and skill. The candy had to be folded before it cooled and cracked. Mothers who mastered ribbon candy were considered artists, their delicate creations displayed proudly on holiday tables. The candy came in multiple colors, often striped, with each hue representing a different flavor from peppermint to cinnamon to wintergreen. Children were warned to handle ribbon candy carefully, its thin edges fragile as glass. Eating it meant carefully breaking off pieces that shattered and dissolved, releasing intense sweetness. Ribbon candy appeared in decorative tins at fancy stores, but homemade versions were fresher and more impressive. This candy represented the highest level of Christmas confectionery skill. Which dirt-cheap dessert takes you back to your family's kitchen? Share your sweetest memories in the comments below. Hit like if these recipes brought back warm feelings, and subscribe for more forgotten flavors from the past.